Hello, this is Brad Carmack, author of Homosexuality, a straight BYU student's perspective. You're welcome to request a hard copy of my book by emailing homosexualityperspective@yahoo.com. You're also welcome to preview it in soft copy form and watch the entire series of YouTube clips which summarize the book at my blog, Brad Carmack, BradCarmack, bradcarmack.blogspot.com. This is the last clip that will be summarizing my book. It correlates to Chapter 7 of my book, which is entitled In Re Proposition 8, Perry v. Schwarzenegger. And in it I'm going to tell a story about an interaction I had with the chief attorney who was defending Proposition 8 in the Walker opinion of Perry v. Schwarzenegger, which is still under appeal. Just a little bit of background or context. My day job, I'm a TA for bioethics in the biology department. In between teaching discussion sections for bioethics, I go to the Marriott School of Management. I'm doing the Master of Public Administration program in there. I'm also TAing there in the Marriott School for Management Ethics. And in my spare time, I do law school. I came out with the first cut of my book, 120 pages worth, in a 3-week period in September and October of 2010, last semester. It was one of the most incredible experiences that I've ever had. I remember oftentimes during that 3-week period when I was engaged in, again, multiple TA jobs, 2 full-time graduate programs, intramurals, church callings, etc., that I was able to compose this book. A lot of the book came to me, I have to be honest. There were some parts where I had to try hard to compose, but most of it kind of came through me rather than being something that I made with deliberation. In fact, I remember oftentimes going to bed at night and having so many ideas of what to write and how to write it that I couldn't sleep. I would just get up and compose for hours to make this book. So, and again, I'm going to talk a little bit more after I share this experience with the attorney of Proposition 8 and a visit that he made to the law school. I'm going to talk a little bit more about why I wrote this book, and I'll do that in the closing. So back to the story. So this is in October. It was September 9th, and I just had a meeting in the Marriott School. I ran across campus and went to the law school, and we were going to hear from Charles Cooper. He was the lead counsel defending Proposition 8 in Perry v. Schwarzenegger. So he spoke to the students and faculty for about an hour, and I got to sit in the front row because I got there a little early. So he spoke for a half hour to the standing room only crowd. It was stuffed. Everybody was there. There were a lot of big names there as well. Judge Griffith, Von Keach, Lance Wickman from the church, the Cole Durham, Lynn Wardle, and Dean James Rasband, law professors, and others all came. So after he had given his half-hour speech, he opened to questions. And it was my opportunity to ask a couple questions. Luckily, he called on me. And my first question addressed his claim that homosexuals can't reproduce. And I refuted his claim, noting that some of them do reproduce. I gave him some examples. For instance, a lesbian partner A gets her egg artificially inseminated, then implants the embryo in partner B, who bears the child. Or you can have a gay couple mix their sperm, fertilize the donated egg, and then have a close friend act as a surrogate. And I further noted that if you stimulate the germline development of totipotent cells, which can turn into any cell type, from partner A into sperm, and then use that sperm to fertilize an egg that comes from the germline of partner B, then you have a 2-parent and 2-parent only homosexual household. And so I asked him whether advancing reproductive technologies would weaken his argument, which was based on tradition and the inability of a same-sex couple to reproduce. And he said no, but that eventually, if the technologies got to that point, that it would weaken his argument, which I think is a notable concession. He pointed out that you have to have a third party currently for same-sex couples to reproduce. I didn't push him on the contention that no one balks when a opposite-sex couple utilizes a third party for reproductive help, or the more obvious rebuttal that reproduction or even likely reproduction or even the willingness to reproduce has never been required to get a marriage license. Even if right reproduction is vital to the institution of marriage, if you let old people that can't reproduce and who aren't even likely to reproduce marry, then why would you deny marriage to homosexually oriented people on the basis of their reproductive capacity? But I didn't go there. But my follow-up question came after he continued to answer my first question, which he did by citing a lengthy list of social ills. He talked about children growing up in single-parent families, growing up without a father, the education and poverty and drug problems that come in those situations. And this is kind of where he lost me. I spent the summer researching for a law professor on issues like the economic and social consequences of family breakdown. So I'm well aware of the breakdown of the family over the last few decades, but it's non sequitur. The argument doesn't support his claim. I mean, he's arguing for definition A, which is man-woman only marriage, over definition B, which is man-woman or man-man or woman-woman. So he's arguing for alternative definition A over alternative definition B, and all the list of social ills that he cites isn't causally related to the definition. I mean, if you look at all those breakdown of the family indicators, they happened in jurisdictions where same-sex marriage was prohibited. It was not legal. It seems, if anything, that those ills are likely caused by heterosexuals, not homosexuals. In fact, if it wasn't other sort of factors besides the definition of marriage that's responsible, it seems most likely it's the traditional definition that causes those ills if it's the definition. Otherwise, it's most likely other factors in society besides the definitional ones. This is sort of a classic witch hunt that you see all the time. Homosexuals are not the perpetrators of society's broken homes and single parenting. There's a quote from The Economist that says, "The weakening of marriage has been heterosexuals' doings, not gays, for it is their infidelity, divorce rates, and single-parent families that have wrought social damage." And you see that it's the same kind of mentality, not to be too extreme here, but the anti-Semitic sort of Nazi mentality of pinning a lot of angst and woes on the Jews and justifies persecuting them. It's not a good thing to be pinning the tail on the wrong donkey here. So my follow-up question appropriately demanded that he identify the nexus or the link between the ills he was citing and the definition that he supports. And it's a non sequitur, so I was asking him to see if maybe I missed something there. He didn't have a very satisfying response. I'm not sure that there is one. However, generally speaking, his position does seem to be in line with the LDS Church. There's a press release that says, "The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints regrets today's decision." This is regarding Proposition 8. When Walker decided it violated the Constitution. California voters have twice been given the opportunity to vote on the definition of marriage in their state, and both times have determined that marriage should be recognized as only between a man and a woman. Now, when I first read this, I was kind of thinking, what happened to the Constitution-loving church that I knew and love? I mean, I think it's well established in Doctrine and Covenants by statements by Presidents Ezra Taft Benson and Hinckley while they're leaders, presidents of the church, and by other statements that the church is very Constitution-affirming. Recently, in 2010, Elder Oaks said, "If we oppose persons who hold particular offices or the policies they pursue, we are free to vote against them or work against their policies. But we should not carry our opposition to the point of opposing their offices or we weaken the institution of constitutional government." And I've heard a number of other members of the church, including leaders such as Elder Wickman, make this argument that the court was overcoming the will of the people. Marbury versus Madison says it is emphatically the province and duty of the judicial department to say what the law is. The judicial branch determines the constitutionality of state laws and constitutional provisions under the federal Constitution. A state law or even a state constitution may not deprive a United States citizen of a right under the United States federal Constitution. If indeed there is a constitutional right to marry, as has been articulated by a number of United States Supreme Court decisions, page 110 of the Perry decision lists a number of them, then it is emphatically the judicial branch's job to define that right. Sure, you can have a floor definition above which the states can experiment with the definition of marriage, but if you don't have a floor, there's nothing to prohibit a state from defining marriage out of existence. There has to be some sort of floor, otherwise you've got citizens in State A that are deprived of the right to marry that's had by citizens in all the other states. If there's no marriage definition, then the right is meaningless, for you couldn't discern then whether or not the right is violated. So one can certainly argue that the court, that Walker got it wrong, but I don't really see how it's defensible to say that the United States Constitution doesn't make it the job of the federal branch to decide what the Constitution says, like what those rights mean. Elder Oaks said, "The United States Supreme Court has the ultimate responsibility of interpreting the meaning of the lofty and general provisions of the Constitution." I think it's very constitutionally dangerous to take the stance that the church did in somehow asserting that it wasn't the province of the federal judiciary to define a federal constitutional right, such as the right to marry. I agree that it may seem odd that one man, in this case Judge Walker, could overturn the express will of 13.4 million people. Again, that was the tally in Proposition 8, 7 million favored and 6.4 million opposed. And you might even agree with Jefferson, who after Marbury v. Madison was passed said that if this view of judicial power became accepted, it would be placing under the despotism of an oligarchy, end quote. But to Thomas Jefferson and others that contend similarly, I say, you lost. Welcome to contemporary America. Federal judicial review of state law or conduct alleged to be violative of federal constitutional rights is how our system has been working for over 2 centuries now. And indeed, I'd say unless there can be a better institution or entity proposed to interpret the Constitution, I think that it should properly reside there. So again, I think that the argument should be that Judge Walker got it wrong, rather than that he shouldn't be making the judgment call. Anyway, that concludes my Proposition 8 story. I guess I apologize a little bit if I get a little too heated on that one. I remember being in that stuffed room and talking with them. It was a good opportunity, but definitely I think exposed some weaknesses in his argument. As an aside, it was reported in the Daily Universe the next a few days later, or maybe it was the next day, I can't remember. And I was interviewed after the event, and I was quoted only as saying his tradition-based argument is very relevant, despite the fact that in my interviews I expressed the weaknesses that were in his argument. But it looked like it was a home run hit, even though there was a number of questions besides my own that were exposed weaknesses in his argument. Anyway, let's go ahead and go to the closing now. Why did I write this book? Why do I care? What are my motivations? What's my story? How did I get involved? A lot of times people ask me these questions, so I think that I'll discuss what my motivations were for writing. I'm going to make a request of you, the viewer, and then I'm going to offer some closing thoughts. So first, what are my motivations for writing? I have lost a lot personally in doing this endeavor, and exploring and the causes and changeability of homosexual orientation, of evaluating the arguments for and against same-sex marriage. A number of people have construed my arguments in my book as being supportive of same-sex marriage and being in opposition to the stance taken by LDS prophets. As a result, I've lost a nomination to the Presidential Management Fellow Program, the MPA program, after I began distributing a draft of my book. Partially as a result of my decision to distribute, decided not to nominate me, which I'm extremely upset about and I think was incredibly unfair and a great injustice. I lost a girlfriend because of my activism. I've had several stressful conversations with my parents, with my bishop, with other leaders and deans, and personal friends. This book was not written for a class. Nobody asked me to do it, at least no mortal person. I'm not part of any advocacy group. And to be quite honest, it's taken a lot out of me, mentally, spiritually, physically, relationally, emotionally. I've wept and researched these pages into existence, and I've had a lot of pushback that has not been pleasant for me. The short and unsatisfying answer to the question of why I care is I don't really remember. I realize it's probably not all that good to hear, but it's kind of been a process, sort of organic, evolutionary, I suppose. But I guess to explain my motivations, I guess the underlying motivation for me is to try to fulfill the missions that Heavenly Father has for me in this life. It's one of my most consistent prayers, and something that I always seek is to know what He wants me to do. And in that way, I kind of mimic Ty Mansfield, who wrote part of In Quiet Desperation. He said, "I believe in Christ in the fullness of the gospel, and when it comes to proclaiming both the redeeming and enabling power of His name, with this specific book and in this particular situation, I could not stand behind name withheld. Because I'm not married, I had to take into consideration how it could affect my potential future family. But nevertheless, as I continued to ponder and pray, I knew what I needed to do. And I felt the Lord's peace with that decision. This is the only thing that matters to me, so regardless of what happens in the future concerning a family or the societal response to the convictions recorded in these pages, I know the Lord is with me and will provide a way for me to do whatever it is that He would have me to do." End quote. Now, I'm not quite as confident as Ty that all the content of my book or in these videos is divinely approved or inspired, but I do feel that I was called to this task. And I think that, generally speaking, the endeavor has been appropriate, and that I would say that some of the content, at least, was inspired. I really don't think I could have written this book and done this work on my own. As I mentioned, a lot of times during that 3-week period when I wrote most of it, the book just came to me. It came through me. How to structure it, what to say, how to organize it, what sources to use. I can't really fully explain what moved me. It was an incredible time. But looking back, I can think of some reasons that would kind of justify what I did. One is timeliness. Same-sex marriage is a defining issue of my generation. Same-sex marriage is a defining issue of my generation. The acknowledgement that biological mechanisms underlie homosexual orientation, that even that homosexual orientation exists, is relatively new, and that knowledge is spreading. More and more people are choosing to be open about their homosexual orientation. And due to improving reproductive technologies, there's going to be increased access to reproduction for homosexuals, including with each other of the same sex. And there's been a number of other changes recently, increased gender and racial equality, economic prosperity, no-fault divorce. A lot of these things have altered marriage from what it looked like, 50 or 60 years ago. And I don't think the institution's ever going to go back to that stage. So it's the time right now to take a look at marriage from both a religious and a civic standpoint, and try to forge ahead with a marriage that's worthy of securing for ourselves and our future generations. So a second reason, besides the timeliness, looking back, why I think that this book and this video series is worth writing, is my own future children. It's my hope that this reason applies to my peers. They're of the millennial generation who are similarly situated. And the reason is this: I plan to marry a woman and raise my own biological children soon. And one or more of those children may be gay or lesbian. And I want the world to be a place where the American dream and the LDS dream, which I believe both of those include the opportunity for marriage, is as bright for my homosexual children as it is for their heterosexual siblings. Indeed, without being overly dramatic, I would cite to an earlier speaker, Martin Luther King Jr., who says, and I'd substitute my words and say, I have a dream that someday, soon, my children will be judged by the content of their character and not by their mostly, if not wholly, biologically determined sexual orientation. So in the interest of my children and timeliness are two other reasons why I care to write this book. Also, another part of my motivation is sort of the human side. I would say that the human side is 1 cup curiosity, 1 cup commitment to truth, and 2 cups of compassion. And that's sort of my path, how I got onto this. I'm curious. Homosexual issues were not on my radar, but about 4 years ago I heard a speech by Bill Bradshaw, who was my cell bio teacher, about the biological origins of homosexual orientation. Unquestionably, his presentation countered my presumptions, and it kind of got my curiosity piqued. And so later on I started to research it. And sometimes I've been known to be a binge learner, so when I start researching something, I just keep researching and researching. And that's how this has unfolded. Second, again, is truth. From my LDS upbringing, I've been taught that above all else, the most important duty we have is to seek for and cleave to truth. And though I don't know that I've ever attained such, I do try to live up to that ideal. There was an epilogue to Understanding Same-Sex Attraction in the LDS edition. It's a book. And Dennis Dolly wrote, "The greatest display of compassion and the greatest blessing that can be given is to find and share the whole truth of the matter." And so I hope that this book adds to that quest, that inquiry, to know the truth about some of these issues. And again, I said that part of my human side of my motivation is 2 parts compassion. As I've looked into the moral arguments around homosexuality and same-sex marriage, I've learned of intense, predictably difficult, and widespread experiences that homosexual members of the church have. I'm reminded of a Lord of the Rings quote from the movie. Frodo said, "I will take the ring to Mordor, though I do not know the way." And Gandalf was putting his hands reassuringly on his shoulders and said, "I will help you bear this burden, Frodo Baggins, as long as it is yours to bear." And so I realize that not all homosexual people consider their orientation a burden, but oftentimes the responses to them and their own responses to their orientation can prove a burden for members. And as much as that's so, that's my baptismal covenant, is to stand there and bear it with you. So part of the motivation for this book is to fulfill a baptismal covenant to bear the burdens of my gay and lesbian brothers and sisters. So what would I hope that you, the viewer, or the reader of my book, will do, feel, or think as a result of what you see here? Bob Rees wrote in Carolyn Pearson's No More Goodbyes, Circling the Wagons Around Our Gay Loved Ones. He said the following: "The Mormon pioneers who set out on the treacherous journey to their promised land did so because they were misunderstood, persecuted, and at times even murdered for their beliefs, including their very unorthodox beliefs about marriage. They went to escape social ostracism and political tyranny that sought to deprive them of the right to live according to their beliefs. What sustained them was their faith and their fellowship with one another, and their belief that they would find a place far away in the West, where none shall come to hurt or make afraid, where they would not only be free of persecution, but free as well to build a better kingdom for themselves and those who will come after. I dream of such a place for our homosexual brothers and sisters, but rather than traveling to it over plains and mountains, rather than carving it out of the desert wilderness, I believe we have to make it where we are, here and now, in our homes, in our communities, and in our congregations. It is the courage of people like Carolyn Pearson that gives me hope that we can, heterosexual and homosexual together, build the Zion we are called to build. End quote. My closing thought. I anticipate that my views on these subjects will change as I learn more information. They definitely have over the last 6 months I've been involved in these issues. All that I've written, all I've said on these videos is tentative. It's just a snapshot of my current thinking, and I doubt it will be exactly the same a year from now. But in composing these videos in this book, I hope that I've learned something and come closer to the truth on some of these issues, and I hope that you, the viewer and or the reader of my book in these video series, will come away with one additional take-home, that members that are faithful of the LDS Church need not remove their critical thinking caps to practice their religion.